Hi there, and welcome back to the Energy Sector Heroes podcast. My name is Michelle Fraser, and every week I will speak with incredible people who share their lessons, experiences, and stories from their time spent in the energy sector. Hi there, and welcome back again to this week's episode. If you're new to the show, then please take a second to subscribe and even consider sharing the show with just one other person. This week, I am joined by Mona Setoodeh. Mona is LNG specialist. Mona, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Mona Setoodeh. I'm based in Houston, and I am an LNG specialist, but I think more importantly, I do lead an incredible team, and that's probably what I take most pride in, from just being able to work with fantastic people in the industry and be able to watch what they can do and accomplish.
So how did you get started off in the energy sector?
My background is engineering. I grew up in the Middle East, so being in the oil and gas is pretty common. And looking at what I wanted to do with my life, my parents both worked for national oil companies. So that is the world that was very, very familiar for me. That's the path I took. I went on to the engineering. And then as I grew through my career, I kind of started seeing the importance of it and really what it can build that we as humans could not have ever accomplished without it. So that's what I chose to stay in and continue developing over the years.
During your career, did you find it hard progressing being a female?
I did, but I had an advantage, I guess, where I grew up. In the school that I went to become an engineer in the first place, we were a class of 60, and it was only 4 of us that were females. So it's kind of a given that you have to fight your way up and out. And if you go in it with that expectation, it's just, at the time, it just felt normal. And by the time you're out and I moved to the United States, it's almost like a built-in skill, right? So yes, I look around and I do see things that may not seem fair, or particularly on the equity spectrum on the higher end, but I guess the background helped me not really sit and ponder on those. And I really decided to spend my energy where I could make a difference, where I could grow, as opposed to, I don't know, for lack of a better word, crying over why I was not treated equally and all the things, right? As important as they are. And I know there are great people who are working to fix the systems systematically, if you would. It was just not my focus. So it helps. It helps if you're not focusing on everything that's not working out.
Because you're currently a vice president, that is a big achievement. Not many people, and not very many females actually achieve that goal. How did you manage to progress your career to that level and to steer yourself into achieving president?
There were a couple of key points, right? First and foremost, I was extremely lucky with the mentors that I had along the way. Being in the oil and gas, some of my bigger advocates were actually men, and they had my back, and they would set the stage in the meetings, whether they were internal or external. And that played a very, very important role. Because if you go in where other, let's call it gray hair men, would set the stage and not accept disrespect and correct the situation, then my job was a lot easier. All I had to do was to hold my own from a technical level of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And the stage was set by people who didn't even have to justify themselves, right? They were already respected. And when they set the tone, that goes an extremely long way. Also, I had mentors that did not particularly believe in a particular growth structure. They were willing to give me opportunities and help me grow in it, even though it was a little bit far from what I had historically gone to school to accomplish. So having those two helped a lot in how I grew. And I did that in a shorter amount of time than most of my colleagues got to do. But in parallel to that, there was the intention of what I wanted to do long term in my career, right? And I communicated those to my supervisors early on that this is my goal. If there is not alignment, just I rather know sooner than later. So we got those addressed. And then at the very end of, I wouldn't say end, but at the key transition points, I had to learn to advocate for myself, which is not something that comes to me naturally. But, when the position was open, there was, the resource planning, transition planning, and decisions that were going to be made. I had to speak up a lot more than I was comfortable doing on behalf of myself, right? So again, I had people who had my back. That's what they say, right? It's important to have people that they speak in rooms that you are not in.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I made sure that I had a voice and I was heard as well, because I genuinely felt I was a better fit for the position than the other candidate. So it was a combination of all that finally brought me to where I am today.
But how do you advocate for yourself? That is really difficult for just anybody, not just even the young graduates. Because even if you know that you're better for the job than maybe someone else, it is quite difficult to put yourself out there.
It is. It is. And again, it's not a natural trait. And so I did a lot of research, right? On how to do it and how to go about it. And also along the way, and it's one of the things that I would always say, just keep educating yourself, because some of these things, once you start reading and knowing how humans behave in general, it opens your eyes to things that you may not naturally see, right? So one of the biggest learnings that I had is, and I'm going to be maybe a little controversial, statistically, right? Men are more confident in boardrooms than women, right? And when you start looking and digging into why is that, and then you see all the research that they say they are not necessarily more competent. That's just how they present themselves. And it goes back to their inherent strengths versus women. And just because they sound confident doesn't mean they are confident. And then there are techniques on how you can sound as competent as you really are, right? So I did a lot of work and a lot of research on how you would implement that and how to speak up, anything from your tone of voice to your posture to your inherent beliefs, because that eventually is going to come up. So yeah, it's not easy, but there are ways to do it. And I had to educate myself on those. But the heart of it, and what really made me realize, is nobody is perfect, men or women. They all have their insecurities. It's just under the surface, we all have the same feelings, but what we allow to come out and not is very different. So, and that helps you feel a bit more that you're not out of place when you're in big rooms with big name people. And that's how I went about it.
I mean, that is really interesting, because even when you're sitting on a board with big name people, that could be intimidating. Did you find it that you would have imposter syndrome about that?
That is a tough one. Again, I didn't grow up acting on my feelings very much, so that helps. It was a job, and I accepted the fact that I had to be 3 times better at my game than men in my position had to be, right? So instead of trying to figure out why and cry over why it's not fair, I just accepted it, right? So I became the best that I could, so that when I did speak, I was confident in my skills, right? not arrogant, but just confident that what I said was correct and were the facts. And I had to pair it up again with the skill of how my sentences should come out to convey the same, right? So yeah, I wouldn't say it's an imposter syndrome. It's knowing that under the surface, everybody feels the same. It's just be the best that you can.
I think that's excellent. I think that's excellent advice. Going back, you were saying that mentoring, do you think it's important for young graduates to find a suitable mentor?
I think it is. I think it is critical. But I do want to reframe it a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I talk about mentoring, I'm not talking about, in a technical field. Yes, if you're trying to learn a particular skill, you need somebody to actually teach you that, right? But when it comes to mentoring, a lot of time is you need somebody that can help you think through the process.
Yeah.
More than somebody that can teach you something, right?
Mm.
Helping you see the bigger picture, helping you see viewpoints that you may not necessarily have the experience in that arena.
Mm.
And what I learned from my mentors, they were not micromanagers, right? So when I was assigned a task, the biggest thing that helped me take risks that I did through my career is the fact that I knew if I missed that there was somebody that would not let me drown, right?
Mm.
My biggest mentor, he was a sink and swim guy. Like, you think you can swim? All right, go ahead. But you knew that if you were in over your head, that he was there to help, but he wouldn't tie your wings, right? And that is like, when you look at a mentor, you got to find the right fit. And some people may need a little more handholding. Some people are more comfortable figuring things out with just a little bit of guidance. So it has to be the right mentor, right fit. But it is to me critical.
How would a graduate find a suitable mentor that would suit them and their personality?
I think if you're working in the environment and you have people around you, you know the folks around you, right? And again, that's the other thing. You're not particularly going and ask that person to be your mentor, right? You can always start by asking the questions, right? But look around you. There are people, and this is the advice that has come very, very handy to me. Wherever you're trying to get to in life, there have been other people who have accomplished it. So just find those, right? And we talk about mentors. I mean, it can be people around you. It can be resources that you can do your research on. It can be a number of things, right? As long as you know where you're headed. Again, there have been plenty of people who have done that. And all you have to do is to figure out where they are, right? But as far as the fit, some of the people, I wouldn't say that they were my mentors, but people that I learned quite a bit from were people that I probably couldn't be in the same room with them for more than 15 minutes. Don't dismiss people you don't get along with. Sometimes some of your biggest learnings are from them. So just something for, I think, everyone to keep in mind.
That's really good advice, but I was going to ask you a couple of questions off the back of that. What has been your biggest learning that you've had off a mentor?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think the biggest one that I learned is if you bring the people that are right fit from a team's perspective, that you can always supplement that with skills. But if you bring somebody in that damages the team and the team dynamics, that is a very, very costly error to fix. That was my biggest thing. You always look at people. Skills you can always train, skills you can always find elsewhere. But if you damage your team, then that is extremely costly.
Okay, but then how do you know whether a person's going to be the right fit for your team?
There is, first of all, when we interview, I bring in different people that are not particularly in the same discipline. And so some of it is the questions that you ask, some of them is the body language, right?
Okay.
To me, the biggest thing, some of our best people are the most humble people you have ever met, right? So if you're interviewing somebody and comes in and he believes that he is the best that has ever been in their field, I just know they're not the right fit for us, right? If we interview people who are after purely climbing the corporate ladder and what the next pay increase would be, we know that they're not the right fit. So they're kind of red flags, if you would. And then for us, just the nature of the work we do is so flexible. So if somebody comes in and we recognize that they are very expert in one field, but not flexible, we know that that's not going to work, right? And nothing wrong with any of those, right? There are plenty of places that can be accommodating, but we know what we need. We know what our culture is. We know what the right fit is. And we would pick up on those red flags when the interviews are taking place. So, and honestly, we like people that show up and challenges even during an interview, right? If you are comfortable enough to challenge people that could potentially offer you a job or not, like those are the things that we go, this guy can actually, have an opinion and not be scared of having an opinion, and somebody who's willing to trust his or her team. So they're both sides, but those are some of the things that we look for. And the other one that I would say, maybe if you're in a management position, lessons learned from my own mistakes, right? If you realize somebody is not the right fit, you need to cut those ties sooner than later, right? And I'm not saying fire people quickly, but I'm saying if you are at a point that go, I think this is not the right fit and it's causing damage, giving it more time. There are certain things you cannot train. And if those traits are not there, again, the lesson that I learned is you're better off moving on sooner.
Okay. I mean, I know that hiring the wrong person can be very costly for a company, but for a new, say, a senior person looking to move into a management position where they are going to be interviewing people, how would you spot the errors of maybe hiring the wrong person?
I wish I had the answer to that. I wish I had the right answer to that, because we have had, unfortunately, people that interviewed extremely well and just were not the right fit.
Okay.
Right. I don't know, Michelle, if you ever have an answer, we all go through the things that we know, but you can do everything right and still come across someone that's just not the right one. I don't have an answer for that.
Because it can be hard, because you could be interviewing maybe 100 people apply and then you take it down to maybe about 5 or 10. I mean, that's difficult in itself to decide who you're going to take to interview. I mean, what is the decisions behind that process?
We look at a big key for me is adaptability. So as I look through the resumes, that's the trait that I look for, right? Because everybody is writing their resumes to present themselves in the best light, right? It's just the nature of why you write the resume, right? You're trying to get the attention of the recruiters and the hiring firms. So I look for adaptability in the roles, but I also look for stability, right? One of the things that we kind of makes us a little hesitant on whether or not we're going to interview someone is lack of stability in their previous roles, right? Is that somebody who is moving every other year, right? Or is that somebody who has shown that they had a couple of employers before that they have stayed longer than 5 years? So things like that are kind of the metrics that we use to gauge out of all the resumes that we have. Besides the skills, of course, you look at the fit, but it's adaptability to change in the roles, but also stability on trying to actually, make something at each stage of their career as opposed to just jumping off for the next shiny position.
How would you spot someone when you're interviewing someone? How would you spot if you thought that they might just take the job for short term?
The only tool that we have is how they have behaved previously, right? That's what in front of us. Now, in the US, we are quite a bit restricted on what we can and cannot ask during the interviews. So we need to be very mindful of those rules, which I understand the reasons behind them. But to the extent that people would share personal information, I think that also is a good indication of where they are in their career, what they are trying to accomplish. Somebody who is just, and I just use this as an example, right? You're right out of school. You're just really trying to figure out what's out there. This is your first or second job. It's a different grade than somebody that shows up and goes, look, I have only moved here because my spouse got a great job. I was happy where I was. I really didn't want to move, but here I am. I'm looking for my next place to grow and make the best out of it. And, here is how I see myself long term. One of the things that I would suggest, and it's a good tool generally to use, is if you ask people what success looks to them in 3, 4, 5 years, if they have thought about it, right? The way they respond to that question tells you whether or not they have even thought about a long-term relationship with the company, right? And especially because it's not a question that's frequently asked, you can make that judgment, how quickly they respond, how fabricated or genuine that response sounds. A lot of those can tell you, like, have they even thought about it, or they're just like, no, I'm just going to take the next job that comes my way and then I'll figure it out, right? So things of that sort are what I like to use, questions I like to ask, right? It's not technical. It's like, how far have you really thought this position through?
Okay, that's interesting. It's also a very hard question to answer if you've not really researched it and thought about where you're going to be in 5 years' time.
But that's the point, right? Because everybody comes in prepared on describing their technical skills and how good a team player they are and all that stuff. But yeah, you throw them something that they're not expecting, and especially with a long-term element.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people that just go blank and go, oh, I haven't thought about that. And then I have had people that they go, yeah, this is what I'm thinking and this is where I'm going. And it's not much about the answer they give. It's more about, is it even on their mind? Right. So that's kind of what we gauge that against.
Okay. So interviews are really hard anyway. So and I don't like them particularly myself either, but everybody needs to do them. What advice would you give young graduates attending an interview? Because it can be nerve-wracking.
It is. A couple of things that I would recommend. Just know that the hiring managers, if you're coming right out of school, it's almost a given that we have to teach you everything, right? We want somebody who has demonstrated that they can go to school, they can be disciplined enough to get out of school with an engineering degree, for example, right? Those are not easy tasks. So you're coming out of school, you're already shown that you are reliable, right? You can get something done. We are already assuming that we have to teach you just about everything, because every company, every industry is different, right? If let's say you come out as a chemical engineer, if you go to the food industry or oil and gas or the renewables, or like, there is no way you're going to come out and know enough about either one of those fields, right? So just know that your job is not to impress your audience from your technical expertise. It's more about showing resilience, right? Can you overcome a hurdle? Are you going to just give up in solving a problem just because it's tough? Are you going to quit because it's going to get tough, right? Can you hold an intelligent conversation? Things of that sort are the ones that we look for. And then I have kids, right? So I have watched them how they do their group projects, right? Some do rely on their teams, and some, well, one of them relies on his team and he is happy to go in with a B if it's the team. And then I have another kid of mine that would bring the whole project home because he just doesn't trust that anybody else can do it as well. And he wants that A, right? And if the two of them are sitting in front of me for an interview and they give me examples on how they accomplish a group project, it tells me the type of team players they may or may not be, right? So those are the traits. So don't think that you're being judged on your technical skills. It's really who you are that matters, and your ability to actually take a task, figure it out, and complete it. Again, depends on the role. Not every role is a team role, but that's one thing. And then the other one I would say is just make yourself as much familiar as you possibly can with the company, with the role that they have out there, and the people you're interviewing. These days, we have so much information at our hands. Just make sure you don't go in there not having done your homework, because that also comes up as if you're showing to an event that is important to you and not prepared, then how am I going to trust that you're going to get any work done that's even less personal to you, right? So that would be my advice.
Okay, that's really good advice as well. I was going to ask the next question: what advice would you give to any new graduates seeking to enter into the energy space?
I would say it is a great space, right? We cannot do anything without it. Whichever branch of energy you choose to go to, we cannot accomplish anything without energy, right? And sometimes, like right now with all the stuff going on around the world, it's even more clear on how important it is and how many other things it drives. So I may be biased, but I think that's a fantastic field to be in. I would suggest that you go in it with a very open mind. I've worked in the energy industry for 20 years now, and I still see things or roles that I didn't even know existed, or innovations that I didn't even know existed. So just go in with an open mind, keep curious, keep your eyes open. And depending on when you look at your employers, kind of look at which one could be a better fit for you. Now, coming out of school, you're now an adult. Sometimes you got to do things that you don't want because you have bills to pay, right? So just keep that in mind. First of all, that's just reality of life. But aside from that, if you do have options, well, number one, create yourself as many options as possible so you can make the choice, right? But look at, some companies are bigger, better structured. You have more formal career development. Some are more flexible. You can pretty much make what you can show you can make out of your career. So figure out which one is a better fit for you. And if you decide at any point that you have made the wrong choice, I would suggest you make your pivot, I wouldn't say abruptly, but as efficiently as you possibly can and quickly, right? I was lucky enough, and I give this as an example. I was lucky enough in being a consultant. I actually got to sit at some of the major companies with their teams doing the engineering design and whatnot. So, and when I sat in that environment, I realized very, very quickly that that's not something I would have ever been able to do for long term. So as I progressed my career, those were not the roles I went after, right? Had I been hired by one of those companies first, I probably would have not lasted more than a couple of years. So it is what you want to make out of your life. It is the hours that you're willing or not willing to work. It is whether you want to be working more as an individual or in bigger teams. There are so many options out there in the energy industry. Just do a little bit of thinking on your own on which one you may enjoy more. And the other thing I would say is always, always, always keep your skills sharp, learn as much as you possibly can. And again, something I tell everyone, be so good that you cannot be ignored. That's one of the biggest things. I'm not sure whose quote that is, but just be so good that you cannot be ignored, because that's where you create yourself options, you create yourself alternatives. Then you get to make a choice, as opposed to, I just got to pick the next opportunity ahead of me just because that's my only option, right? I don't like to be in that position. I don't think it's a very pleasant place to be. So be good and create options so you can choose.
It's quite amazing advice, actually, because firstly, how do you become the best you can be so you can't be ignored? And how do you actually create opportunities for yourself?
So first of all, decide what it is that you're trying to get the best at, right? And best is a relative term, right? It's however good you become, there's always somebody who can do it better, right? So we're talking about just be the best that you can be within your strengths. The one thing that I would highly recommend is figure out what your inherent strengths are and build on those, right? I am not very good in the details, and I know that about myself, right? So I could try as hard as I possibly can. I would never be as good of an engineer as just about every engineer I have working for our company. But I'm also aware enough to know that I do a lot better with looking at a big picture and the bigger pieces and being able to put all those together, or looking at what might be coming at us next. Where is the next tripping point for my team? That they are, they're focused in solving the problem in front of them. I am a lot better than go, as you're solving this problem, that's the next bump that we may hit. How do we get ahead of that, right? So, and these are the things that I think everybody knows about themselves. So to be the best that you can be, you need to build on your inherent strengths. You need to address your weaknesses to the point that it's needed for you to get your job done, be a good fit for the team and all that. Nothing against that. It needs to be done, right? If you're not good with communication, yes, you have to improve it, but that's not where you want to focus on becoming the best, right? If details are your thing, you might, be a lot better off and more efficient in how you're using your energy and time and resources in doing things that are more detail oriented. So number one is, again, build on your inherent interest in inherent skills and strengths. And then for you to create options, the biggest thing is build a very strong network. You're going to come across people. It takes time, be patient with it, but build your network and keep your eyes open, because within the energy industry, and I want to say it's everywhere, at the end of the day, it's people, and people move around. And by staying in contact, it doesn't mean call everybody every week and have a list and you go down the list every day, but just be very aware of how people are moving, what is happening, and keep your key connections alive and active. You just never know. And the same way that you're talking about people wanting to create options, one of them is, if I'm the one looking for a job, and who do I know around that I think they're doing something interesting that could use my skills, but at the same time I could be using looking for people, and I get calls from folks that I've worked with years ago that they're looking, right? So it's a choice in who I want to work for, and it's also a choice on who I may want to bring to my team. So the network aspect of it, I think, is what I see a lot of people ignore, especially with people who are highly technical. They tend to forget that at the end of the day, we're still dealing with a lot of other humans, and there is a lot of value in what options you're going to have long term. So I would suggest that you keep your network live and active, and it has to be part of your job.
Because it's so easy to do that nowadays, but it was quite hard when at the start of your career.
Yes. But start of my career, again, talking about mentorship, my boss made a point to take me to a lot of the industry events early on. And it was an investment on his behalf, right? I mean, look at the attendance fee for all these conferences these days. And it was an investment because, one, if I was not at my desk, I was not generating revenue. And two, he had to pay the bills for me to attend, but it was an investment that ultimately paid for the company, right? Because now I had my network in addition to everybody else, and that over the years generated more opportunities for me as a person and for the company as a whole. So yeah, it was not as easy as going on LinkedIn and connecting with people and doing all that. It was physical connections and meetings, and it took time, but I think at the same time it made it more personal and more. It's harder to forget people that you physically meet at every other conference, right? So I still enjoy that aspect of it. I still attend conferences to the extent that I can and reconnect with people in person, right? I could have an hour conversation or a 2-hour coffee. I would take the 2-hour coffee, right? I will make that drive to meet people in person.
And I think that's a really wise words as well. I was going back to one thing that you did say, actually. For new managers, is it important to have a really strong team and to maybe hire an engineer that's maybe better than yourself so you have a really strong team? Because a lot of managers don't. It can be, I think it would, yeah, they don't. I have to say it. I was gonna rephrase it, but some of them don't. It is true.
I think some of it, and edit this out if you need, but I think some of it is ego. And there is no shortage of that in any industry. So some of it is that, but at the end of the day, I think there is a distinction between management and technical experts, right? My job is not, at least the way I see it, my job is not to solve technical problems. My job is to bring the right people, and my job is to give them the tools. And then that the way I phrase it, I get the right people, I give them the tools, and then I try to stay out of their way because that's their expertise. Mine is to make sure that they actually can implement their expertise and solve the client issues. It's not my job to be a better engineer than them, right? If I wanted to be a better engineer or the best engineer, whatever you want to call it, then I wouldn't take the management path. I took the management path because at least I think that's my stronger suit. So, but yes, I do make a point of hiring people more intelligent and most definitely better engineers than myself.
And there are a lot of really clever engineers and really clever managers as well. But do you not think that to be a manager, you have to have a really good background in engineering, especially if you're going to be a technical manager?
I think that if you are managing people, that it is extremely important that you have a very good understanding on the field that they are serving, right? I'll give you an example. I have engineers in our group. We have an engineering group, we have an environmental and regulatory group, and we have a group that looks purely after contracts, schedule, and cost for the projects, right? My background is engineering, but I don't think that I could have done my job properly if I didn't, at the core of it, understand what each of those groups are offering to the client, right? So, and I'm not an environmental person. I've never had that training. If you tell me to look at, I don't know, an air modeling and tell you if it's good or bad, I probably couldn't give you enough details on it. But I do understand the core of what our environmental and regulatory group is providing. I understand the intent of those services. I understand how they tie into the regulatory regime of the projects. I understand how they tie back to the engineering. So I just think if you're managing a team, you need to make sure that you understand at a high level what it is that they do and the purpose of it. Because if you don't, then again, you can't make the key decisions to help them do their job.
Okay. But then to be a good manager, you should be able to decide on them key decisions quite quickly, don't you?
Correct. So that comes down to knowing what questions to ask to drive at the decisions that you need to get to, right? So again, I have my people that come to me and go, okay, this project has this particular challenge and they may not meet their timelines because of this, that, and the other, right? Me trying to understand the technical pieces of it or the details of every aspect of it is not going to help them. My job is to help my team look at it, kind of step back for a minute and say, all right, so if you were to fix one, is like, what is the damage that, help me understand what damage we're trying to stop, right? This is a problem. What damage can it cause? What is it that we're trying to stop? A lot of times I help them think on how to prioritize the efforts, right? And then kind of look at how it's tied to everything else that a project might be trying to do, right? So again, the details of it, they know, and it's their job to know. I need to bring them up to the point that they can answer some of the key questions, and then we can make the best decision that we can for our clients. And then the last bit of it is, how do you communicate that back to the client? How do you help them work through whatever challenge it is that they may be going through?
Okay. So to be a manager, you're going to have to be an effective communicator to try and get the best out of your team.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What is your take on micromanaging then?
I stay away from hiring people who need micromanagement. I did not like it. I wouldn't be able to work in an environment where somebody is looking over my shoulder every minute. And again, some of it is nature of the work that we provide. But if I'm hiring you to do a job, if I can't trust that you do the work properly, then you're probably not the right fit for us. So now, that doesn't mean that we don't review the work. It's just not my job to review the work, right? So I tell you to write the technical report, right? And I give you a timeline, go, this needs to be done. These are the client expectations. This needs to get done. You would do the work, and then there is another colleague that will be reviewing the work from a technical aspect, from a correctness, quality, whatever the case might be. So we do have those checkpoints as a company, right? So that the work product is high quality, meeting the timeline and the needs of the client. But if I'm telling you that this job needs to be done by Friday, I'm not going to be at your desk every day. I go, hey, are you on line 3 out of 35? Are you on page, I don't think it's helpful. So in that sense, I stay away from it. And we recruit people who can manage their own time and have the product when they commit to have it ready.
I'm going to maybe ask you one last question, actually, and I could ask you a million more questions, actually. How would a young graduate get their boss to really trust them that they can do the job?
It depends on the boss, right? It's again, don't forget we are all humans. So let me maybe put a couple of finer points to that. Number one, just understand that your boss is also a human with its own or his or her own inherent traits, right? Some people, again, I was lucky enough, my boss was a sink or swim. If I told him I wanted to do something, he would be like, okay, go do it. Let me know if you need help. And some people are like, no, I need reporting every 5 minutes. So just understand that some of it is who your boss is and has nothing to do with who you are and how good you may be, right? So know who you're dealing with. Don't take things personally. And generally speaking, trust is built over time. So you need to make sure that you're building that trust at every step of the way. A big part of it is communicating. If you're working on something, if you have issues, raise them early. Again, you're a young graduate. Your boss should not expect of you to know everything, but it's very reasonable that if you have a problem, you tell me on Monday and not 3 hours before it's due on Friday. But trust takes time to build. So you need to be building that at every step. It is good to think about it. If you were in your boss's shoe, what would you like to see? What would help you trust the next person and go about it that way? Don't get discouraged because of the mistakes that you make along the way. As long as you own them, that helps building trust. You own them, you correct them, and you make sure you don't make the same mistakes again. Like that in my book is huge. We talked about how somebody is not the right fit. If I'm interviewing somebody and I go, okay, so, where did you run into issues? And if they start telling me how everybody else did things wrong that led to their failure, that's not someone I want on my team. Right? So if you make a mistake somewhere along the way, just own it, have a plan to fix it. And that's the best way to build trust as you go along the way, right? And again, be as good as you possibly can be, learn as much as you possibly can, and continually improve on your skills. That's extremely important.
I agree. And I'm going to leave it there. That's all the questions I have today. I would like to thank Mona for your time. That brings us to the end of another episode. Thanks for listening and see you next week. That brings us to the end of another episode. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, I'd like to gently encourage you to leave a 5-star rating wherever you listen to podcasts and share the show with another person. You can also follow me on LinkedIn or via my website, www.michellefraserconsultancy.com. Thanks again for listening and see you next week.